Question 1. Considering the principles outlined in ISO 14008 for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, which strategic approach would most effectively integrate these valuations into the development of an organization's environmental risk management framework, particularly when addressing the potential for significant unquantified externalities? Option A. Implementing a qualitative risk assessment process that acknowledges potential environmental impacts but bypasses the monetary valuation aspect to avoid complexity. Option B. Focusing solely on regulatory compliance metrics without considering the broader economic implications of environmental impacts as identified by ISO 14008. Option C. Conducting a separate, independent financial risk assessment that does not directly incorporate the monetary valuation outcomes from the environmental impact assessment. Option D. Prioritizing risk mitigation actions based on the monetary values assigned to potential environmental impacts to guide resource allocation and inform compensation strategies. Correct answer is D. Prioritizing risk mitigation actions based on the monetary values assigned to potential environmental impacts to guide resource allocation and inform compensation strategies. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14008 is to provide a framework for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts. When developing risk management strategies in this context, the focus is on integrating these valuations into decision-making processes. This involves identifying potential environmental impacts, assessing their significance, and then assigning monetary values to these impacts. The purpose of this valuation is not merely to quantify, but to inform strategies that mitigate, adapt to, or compensate for these impacts. Therefore, the most effective risk management strategy under ISO 14008 would be one that directly uses the outcomes of the monetary valuation to guide actions aimed at reducing the likelihood or magnitude of adverse environmental effects, or to determine appropriate compensation mechanisms. This aligns with the standard's aim of making environmental performance more transparent and comparable through economic lenses. The process involves understanding the relationships between environmental aspects, their impacts, and the monetary values assigned, then using this understanding to prioritize and implement risk reduction measures. This iterative process ensures that financial considerations are intrinsically linked to environmental protection efforts, facilitating more robust and defensible environmental management decisions. Question 2. When a proposed infrastructure project threatens to degrade the water quality of a significant estuarine ecosystem, impacting both biodiversity and local tourism dependent on recreational fishing, which principle of monetary valuation, as outlined in ISO 14008-2019, would most strongly guide the selection of a valuation technique to quantify the loss of recreational fishing opportunities? Option A. Prioritizing valuation methods that rely solely on observed market prices, even if they do not fully capture the intrinsic value of the ecosystem services. Option B. Focusing exclusively on the cost of remediation or restoration, disregarding the economic value of the lost recreational activities. Option C. Applying a standardized, one-size-fits-all valuation model regardless of the specific characteristics of the estuarine ecosystem or the nature of the impact. Option D. Ensuring the chosen valuation method is appropriate for non-market environmental goods and services, considering user preferences and potential economic losses in the absence of direct market transactions. Correct answer is D. Ensuring the chosen valuation method is appropriate for non-market environmental goods and services, considering user preferences and potential economic losses in the absence of direct market transactions. Explanation. ISO 14008-2019, specifically in its principles of monetary valuation, emphasizes the importance of selecting appropriate valuation methods based on the specific environmental aspect, the context of the valuation, and the intended use of the results. The standard outlines various approaches, including market-based methods like hedonic pricing or travel cost, non-market-based methods like contingent valuation or choice experiments, and cost-based methods like replacement cost or damage cost. A key principle is ensuring that the chosen method adequately captures the relevant environmental impacts and that the valuation is conducted with transparency and methodological rigor. And considering the impact of a new industrial facility on a local water body, a valuation of the potential loss of recreational fishing value would require careful consideration of the affected user groups and their willingness to pay for access, or their willingness to accept compensation for the loss. Methods like contingent valuation or choice experiments are often employed for such non-market goods where direct market prices are absent. The valuation should also consider the spatial and temporal dimensions of the impact, ensuring that the valuation reflects the full extent of the damage or benefit. For instance, if the impact is on a migratory fish population, the valuation needs to account for effects beyond the immediate locality. The selection of the valuation method should be justified and documented, demonstrating its suitability for the specific environmental impact and the decision-making context, aligning with the principles of reliability and relevance that underpin ISO 14008. Question 3. Consider a scenario where a vital coastal wetland, serving as a critical nursery for commercially important fish species and a natural buffer against storm surges, is threatened by proposed industrial development. This wetland is a common resource, accessible to all but with no single owner responsible for its upkeep. Which of the following approaches, aligned with the principles of ISO 14008-2019, would be most appropriate for monetarily valuing the environmental impacts of this development on the wetland's ecosystem services? Option A. Solely utilizing the market price of fish caught in the area to represent the wetland's economic contribution, disregarding its other functions. Option B. Calculating the cost of land reclamation for industrial use as a proxy for the wetland's value, ignoring ecological functions. Option C. Applying a simple input-output model based on the industrial output, assuming the wetland's value is solely derived from its potential for development. Option D. Employing a combination of travel cost method for recreational fishing benefits and replacement cost for storm surge protection, alongside contingent valuation for non-use values like biodiversity preservation. Correct answer is D. Employing a combination of travel cost method for recreational fishing benefits and replacement cost for storm surge protection, alongside contingent valuation for non-use values like biodiversity preservation. Explanation. ISO 14008-2019 addresses the monetary valuation of environmental impacts. When considering public goods and common resources, such as a shared aquifer that is being depleted by multiple agricultural users, the standard emphasizes the importance of capturing externalities. The depletion of the aquifer represents a negative externality, as the cost of reduced water availability is borne by all users, not just the individual who abstracts the most water. The valuation methods outlined in ISO 14008, such as contingent valuation or choice modeling, can be employed to estimate the economic value of this environmental degradation. The core principle is to internalize these external costs, making the true cost of water abstraction apparent to all parties. This often involves considering the loss of future availability and the potential need for costly artificial replenishment or alternative water sources. The valuation should reflect the aggregate willingness to pay to prevent the depletion or the aggregate willingness to accept compensation for the loss. This aligns with the broader goal of environmental accounting and sustainable resource management by providing a monetary basis for decision-making regarding resource use and conservation policies. The most appropriate approach for public goods and common resources, which are characterized by non-excludability and rivalry, or potential rivalry, is to focus on the total economic value, including use and non-use values, and to consider the implications for intergenerational equity. Question 4. When implementing a strategic environmental assessment, C, for a national infrastructure development policy under the guidance of ISO 14008, what is the primary objective of integrating monetized environmental values into the comparative analysis of policy alternatives? Option A. To fulfill a mandatory regulatory requirement stipulated by the European Union's Environmental Impact Assessment Directive, irrespective of the actual utility of the monetary figures in decision-making. Option B. To provide a quantitative basis for comparing the economic efficiency of different policy pathways, explicitly accounting for the financial cost of environmental degradation or improvement associated with each pathway. Option C. To generate a single, definitive monetary figure for the overall environmental performance of each policy alternative, thereby simplifying the decision-making process for policymakers. Option D, to serve as a persuasive tool for public engagement, presenting complex environmental issues in easily digestible monetary terms to garner broad societal support for the preferred policy. The correct answer is B, to provide a quantitative basis for comparing the economic efficiency of different policy pathways, explicitly accounting for the financial cost of environmental degradation or improvement associated with each pathway. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14008 is to provide a framework for monetarily valuing environmental impacts and related environmental aspects. Strategic environmental assessment, C, as applied within this standard, focuses on the early stages of decision-making for plans, programs, and policies. When considering the integration of monetized environmental values into SEA, the standard emphasizes that these values should inform the assessment of alternatives and contribute to a more comprehensive understanding of potential environmental consequences before significant commitments are made. The process involves identifying relevant environmental impacts, selecting appropriate valuation methods, and applying these methods to quantify the impacts in monetary terms. This monetary information then serves as an input to the SEA process, aiding in the comparison of different strategic options and the selection of those with more favorable environmental outcomes, considering both environmental performance and economic implications. The standard guides users on how to ensure that the monetary valuation is transparent, credible, and relevant to the decision-making context, ultimately supporting more informed and sustainable strategic choices. It is crucial that the monetary valuation is not an isolated exercise, but is integrated into the broader SEA methodology to influence the development and selection of strategies. Question 5. Consider a scenario where a new industrial process is being evaluated for its environmental impacts, which include the release of a persistent pollutant with effects that will manifest significantly over centuries. In applying the principles of ISO 14008-2019 to ensure intergenerational equity in the monetary valuation of these impacts, what methodological consideration is most crucial for accurately reflecting the burden on future generations? Option A, employing a low discount rate to give greater present value to future environmental damages. Option B, focusing solely on the direct, immediate costs of pollution control measures rather than the long-term consequences. Option C, excluding any valuation of impacts that extend beyond a 50-year time horizon to simplify the analysis. Option D, utilizing a high discount rate to prioritize immediate economic benefits over long-term environmental costs. Correct answer is A, employing a low discount rate to give greater present value to future environmental damages. Explanation. ISO 14008-2019, concerning the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, addresses the intergenerational equity principle by emphasizing the long-term consequences of environmental degradation and the need to account for future generations' well-being. When valuing environmental impacts, especially those with persistent or cumulative effects, the standard guides users to consider discount rates that reflect societal preferences for future consumption and the potential for technological advancements to mitigate future damages. A lower discount rate is generally preferred when addressing impacts that will be felt for extended periods or by future generations, as it gives greater weight to future costs and benefits. This approach acknowledges that current decisions have lasting implications and that future generations should not bear an inequitable burden of environmental harm caused by present activities. The standard encourages the use of a range of discount rates to explore sensitivity and to ensure that the valuation reflects a prudent approach to intergenerational resource management, aligning with broader sustainability goals that aim to meet present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own. The core idea is to internalize the costs of environmental damage in a way that is fair across time, ensuring that the economic valuation reflects the true, long-term societal cost. Question 6. Consider a scenario where an industrial facility's wastewater discharge, containing elevated levels of suspended solids, leads to increased turbidity in a local river. This increased turbidity impedes the photosynthetic activity of aquatic vegetation, which is a primary food source for a commercially important fish species. An economic analysis aims to monetize this impact using the production function method as outlined in ISO 14008. What is the fundamental principle guiding the monetary valuation of this specific environmental impact under this method? Option A. Monetizing the reduction in the market value of the fish catch due to lower fish population, driven by the reduced food availability stemming from impaired aquatic vegetation photosynthesis. Option B. Estimating the cost of water treatment required to restore the river's clarity to levels that support optimal aquatic vegetation growth. Option C. Calculating the loss in recreational fishing revenue caused by a decline in the fish population, directly linked to the wastewater discharge. Option D. Assessing the societal willingness to pay for improved river water clarity, irrespective of its impact on fish populations. The correct answer is A. Monetizing the reduction in the market value of the fish catch due to lower fish population, driven by the reduced food availability stemming from impaired aquatic vegetation photosynthesis. Explanation: the production function method for monetary valuation, as discussed within the framework of ISO 14008, focuses on how environmental changes impact the productivity of natural resources that are inputs to economic activities. It quantifies the monetary value of an environmental impact by assessing its effect on the quantity or quality of a good or service that can be produced. For instance, if an environmental pollutant reduces the yield of a crop, the production function method would estimate the monetary loss by calculating the value of the lost crop output. This method is particularly relevant for impacts affecting agricultural productivity, forestry, fisheries, or any sector where environmental quality directly influences production levels. The core principle is to link the physical change in an environmental parameter to a change in the output of an economic activity, and then to monetize that change in output using market prices or estimated values. This approach requires understanding the relationship between environmental conditions and production processes, often necessitating econometric modeling or expert judgment to establish the production function. It's crucial to consider that the method relies on the assumption that the observed production is efficient, and that the environmental factor is the sole or primary driver of the observed change in output. The valuation is derived from the change in economic output, which is then translated into a monetary figure. Question 7. When applying the total economic value (TEV) framework to monetize the environmental impacts of a proposed industrial development that threatens a significant coastal wetland, which component of TEV would primarily capture the economic benefit derived from the wetland's capacity to mitigate the financial losses associated with storm surges impacting adjacent residential areas? Option A. Direct use values. Option B. Option values. Option C. Non-use values. Option D. Indirect use values. The correct answer is D. Indirect use values. Explanation: the total economic value (TEV) framework is a comprehensive approach to valuing environmental and ecosystem services. It categorizes values into direct use values, indirect use values, and non-use values. Direct use values are derived from the consumption or utilization of an environmental resource, such as timber harvesting or fishing. Indirect use values relate to the functional roles of ecosystems, like flood regulation or water purification. Non-use values encompass existence value, satisfaction from knowing a resource exists; bequest value, satisfaction from preserving a resource for future generations; and option value, potential future use. ISO 14008-2019, concerning the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, acknowledges the utility of such frameworks for a holistic assessment. When considering the monetary valuation of a coastal wetland, the TEV framework would guide the identification of all potential economic benefits. Direct use values might include income from ecotourism and shellfish harvesting. Indirect use values would encompass the economic benefits derived from the wetland's role in storm surge protection, thereby reducing property damage costs for nearby communities. Non-use values, though often more challenging to quantify, are crucial for a complete valuation and would include the satisfaction citizens derive from the mere existence of the healthy wetland ecosystem, even if they never visit it. Therefore, a comprehensive valuation under ISO 14008-2019 would necessitate the inclusion of all these categories to reflect the full spectrum of economic benefits. Question 8. Consider a scenario where a pristine forest ecosystem in a developing nation provides critical regulating services by absorbing atmospheric carbon dioxide, thereby mitigating the impacts of climate change on a global scale. The government is undertaking an environmental accounting exercise aligned with ISO 14008-2019 to quantify the monetary value of this forest's contribution to climate regulation. Which valuation approach would most directly reflect the avoided costs associated with future climate change impacts that this Forest Service helps to prevent, and is therefore a primary consideration under the standard for such a regulating service? Option A, replacement cost. Option B, contingent valuation. Option C, market price. Option D, avoided damages. The correct answer is D, avoided damages. Explanation: the valuation of specific ecosystem services under ISO 14008-2019 necessitates a careful consideration of various methods, each with its strengths and limitations. When assessing the monetary value of a regulating service, such as the flood mitigation provided by a wetland, the standard often guides towards approaches that capture the avoided damages or the cost of providing an equivalent artificial solution. For instance, if a wetland prevents $$1,000,000 in flood damage to a downstream community during a severe storm, and the cost of constructing artificial flood defenses to achieve a similar level of protection would be $$800,000. The avoided damage approach directly reflects the economic benefit of the ecosystem service. This method aligns with the principle of valuing environmental impacts by their consequence on human welfare and economic activities. Other methods like the cost of replacement or restoration are also relevant, but avoided damages are particularly pertinent for regulating services that prevent negative externalities. The standard emphasizes that the chosen method should be appropriate for the specific environmental aspect and the context of the valuation. Therefore, focusing on the direct economic benefit derived from preventing a quantifiable loss is a primary consideration. Question 9. Consider a scenario where an upstream industrial plant discharges effluent into a river that flows through agricultural lands and then into a downstream community's primary water source. The agricultural producers downstream experience reduced crop yields due to altered water quality, and the community faces increased costs for water treatment. The property rights concerning water usage and quality in this region are established by a National Water Act that grants riparian rights, but also includes provisions for government regulation of water quality standards and discharge permits. Which approach to monetary valuation, as outlined by ISO 14008-2019, would be most directly applicable for valuing the environmental impacts on the agricultural producers, given these property rights and regulatory frameworks? Option A, non-market valuation methods focusing solely on the community's stated preferences for clean water. Option B, market-based valuation methods, leveraging the observed impact on agricultural land values and input costs. Option C, revealed preference methods that rely on travel cost data to estimate recreational use values of the river. Option D, cost-based valuation methods, calculating the administrative costs of enforcing water quality regulations. The correct answer is B, market-based valuation methods, leveraging the observed impact on agricultural land values and input costs. Explanation: ISO 14008-2019, in its framework for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, addresses how property rights can influence the selection and application of valuation methods. When dealing with environmental impacts that affect clearly defined and transferable property rights, such as a specific parcel of land experiencing pollution from a nearby industrial facility, methods that rely on market-based approaches are often more directly applicable. These methods, like the hedonic pricing method or the travel cost method, are designed to infer the value of environmental amenities or disamenities by observing how they affect the prices of related private property or the expenditures people make to access them. The existence of well-defined property rights allows for the possibility of compensation or market transactions related to the environmental impact, making these approaches suitable for capturing the monetary value. Conversely, for impacts affecting common pool resources or public goods, where property rights are ill-defined or non-existent, such as the impact of global climate change on atmospheric quality. Non-market valuation methods like contingent valuation or choice experiments become more relevant, as they directly elicit willingness to pay or accept compensation. Therefore, the clarity and enforceability of property rights are critical determinants in selecting the most appropriate valuation technique under ISO 14008. Question 10. When implementing ISO 14008, 2019 for a regional water authority, assessing the monetary value of dissolved oxygen depletion in a major river system, which of the following considerations is paramount for ensuring the robustness and applicability of the valuation? Option A. The exclusive use of contingent valuation methods, assuming this approach is universally superior for all environmental impacts. Option B. The primary focus on readily available market prices for oxygenating agents, regardless of their effectiveness in restoring the river's ecosystem health. Option C. The selection of valuation techniques that accurately reflect the ecological services affected and are appropriate for the scale of the impact, considering the river's designation under national water quality regulations. Option D. The prioritization of internal cost accounting metrics over external environmental valuation methodologies, even when mandated by environmental impact assessment directives. The correct answer is C. The selection of valuation techniques that accurately reflect the ecological services affected and are appropriate for the scale of the impact, considering the river's designation under national water quality regulations. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14008-2019 is to provide a framework for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts. This standard acknowledges that different contexts, such as the scale of the organization, the specific environmental aspects being considered, and the intended use of the valuation, will necessitate different approaches. For instance, a small local business assessing the impact of a single effluent discharge might use a simpler method like market prices for remediation, whereas a multinational corporation evaluating the life cycle impact of product would require more complex methods, potentially including shadow pricing for non-market goods or contingent valuation for public goods. The standard emphasizes the importance of transparency, consistency, and the use of appropriate valuation techniques for the specific context. It does not mandate a single valuation method, but rather guides the selection and application of methods that are fit for purpose. Therefore, when considering the application of ISO 14008 in diverse settings, the most critical factor is the alignment of the chosen valuation methodology with the specific environmental aspects, the data availability, the intended audience of the valuation, and the relevant legal and regulatory requirements, such as national environmental protection acts or international agreements that may influence the definition of environmental damage and its compensation. The standard encourages the use of a range of techniques, from direct market price approaches to more indirect methods like benefit transfer or stated preference methods, depending on the nature of the impact and the data available. Question 11. Consider a hypothetical scenario where a regional environmental agency mandates the installation of advanced wastewater treatment facilities for all industrial sites discharging into the Azure River. Prior to this mandate, a significant quantity of untreated industrial effluent was released, contributing to eutrophication and impacting downstream fisheries. The agency's economic assessment, adhering to ISO 14008 principles, aims to quantify the avoided environmental cost associated with this new regulatory requirement. If the estimated cost of ecosystem degradation per unit of nutrient discharge is /75 euros, and the new facilities collectively reduce the annual nutrient discharge by /5000 units, what is the monetary value of the avoided environmental impact using the damage cost avoided method? Option A, 375,000 euros. Option B, 5,000 euros. Option C, 75 euros. Option D, 37,500 euros. The correct answer is A, 375,000 euros. Explanation. The damage cost avoided DCA method, as applied within the framework of ISO 14008, quantifies the monetary value of environmental impacts by assessing the cost that would have been incurred if a specific environmental benefit or improvement had not been achieved. Essentially, it reverses the logic of a damage cost approach. Instead of calculating the cost of damage caused by an activity, it calculates the cost that would have been incurred if a protective measure or mitigation action had not been implemented, thereby avoiding that damage. For example, if a company invests in a new filtration system that prevents 100 kg of particulate matter from entering the atmosphere, and the established cost of damage per kg of particulate matter is 50 USD, the DCA would be 100 text kg times 50 text USD kg equals 5000 text USD . This 5000 USD represents the cost that would have been incurred, i.e., the damage that would have occurred if the filtration system had not been installed. The key is identifying a baseline scenario where the environmental impact would have been greater without the intervention being evaluated. This method is particularly useful when direct damage costs are difficult to ascertain or when the focus is on the value of preventive actions. It requires robust data on the physical extent of the avoided impact and reliable estimates of the monetary value of that impact. The application of this method is contingent on the availability of scientifically sound dose-response relationships and established monetary valuation techniques for the specific environmental aspect being considered, aligning with the principles outlined in ISO 14008 for consistent and comparable environmental accounting. Question 12. A regional environmental agency is tasked with assessing the economic implications of a proposed infrastructure project that is anticipated to cause significant fragmentation of a critical pollinator habitat, thereby reducing the pollination services provided to local agricultural producers. The agency needs to quantify the monetary value of this lost ecosystem service to inform regulatory decisions and potential compensation mechanisms. Considering the principles outlined in ISO 14008-2019 for selecting appropriate monetary valuation methodologies, which approach would be most suitable for directly estimating the economic loss associated with the diminished pollination service? Option A. Applying hedonic pricing models to analyze how property values are affected by proximity to pollinator-dependent agricultural lands. Option B. Utilizing the travel cost method to estimate the value of recreational access to the remaining pollinator habitats. Option C. Employing contingent valuation or choice experiments to elicit the willingness to pay for maintaining or restoring pollination services. Option D. Calculating the replacement cost of pollination services by estimating the expense of artificial pollination technologies. The correct answer is C. Employing contingent valuation or choice experiments to elicit the willingness to pay for maintaining or restoring pollination services. Explanation. ISO 14008-2019 provides a framework for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts. The standard emphasizes the importance of selecting appropriate valuation methodologies based on the specific environmental aspect, the purpose of the valuation, and the availability of data. When considering the valuation of impacts on biodiversity, particularly the loss of a specific ecosystem service like pollination due to habitat fragmentation, contingent valuation and choice experiments are often employed. These methods elicit willingness to pay WTP from individuals for preserving or restoring the service, while travel cost methods are suitable for valuing recreational benefits of natural areas, and hedonic pricing is useful for valuing environmental amenities through property markets. They are less direct for quantifying the specific economic value of a lost pollination service. The key is to align the methodology with the nature of the impact and the information sought. Contingent valuation and choice experiments directly address preferences for environmental changes that affect ecosystem services. Question 13. A multinational manufacturing firm operating under strict national environmental regulations that mandate the reporting of environmental costs is evaluating the potential monetary valuation of a significant reduction in its atmospheric emissions. The company's internal accounting department has calculated the direct financial savings from reduced energy consumption and the avoided costs of pollution control equipment upgrades. However, external environmental economists, engaged to provide a comprehensive assessment aligned with ISO 14008 principles, have also factored in the estimated societal benefits of improved air quality, such as reduced public health expenditures and enhanced ecosystem services. Which of the following accurately characterizes the primary difference in the valuation approaches used by the internal accounting department and the external environmental economists in this scenario? Option A. The accounting department assessed the direct financial liabilities, while the economists estimated the potential fines and penalties for noncompliance. Option B. The accounting department focused on financial value, reflecting direct monetary flows to the firm, while the economists considered economic value, encompassing broader societal welfare and externalities. Option C. The accounting department prioritized market-based valuation methods, while the economists utilized contingent valuation and choice modeling for non-market impacts. Option D. The accounting department calculated the opportunity cost of pollution, whereas the economists determined the replacement cost of environmental damage. Correct answer is B. The accounting department focused on financial value, reflecting direct monetary flows to the firm, while the economists considered economic value, encompassing broader societal welfare and externalities. Explanation: the core distinction between economic value and financial value in the context of ISO 14008 lies in their scope and perspective. Economic value, as applied in environmental valuation, aims to capture the total societal welfare derived from an environmental good or service, including both market and non-market impacts. This encompasses willingness to pay for benefits and willingness to accept for losses, reflecting a broader societal perspective. Financial value, conversely, is concerned with the monetary flows and accounting considerations within a specific entity or transaction. It typically focuses on costs incurred, revenues generated, and the direct financial implications for an organization. ISO 14008, in its pursuit of monetary valuation of environmental impacts, leans towards capturing economic value to provide a more comprehensive understanding of the societal costs and benefits associated with environmental changes, thereby informing decision-making beyond purely financial considerations. For instance, valuing the loss of biodiversity due to industrial pollution would consider the economic value to society. G. Ecosystem services, recreational opportunities, intrinsic value, rather than solely the financial cost to the polluting entity for remediation or fines. This aligns with the standard's objective of internalizing environmental externalities. Question 14. An industrial conglomerate, EcoCorp, is undertaking a comprehensive environmental impact assessment for a new manufacturing facility, aiming to comply with emerging national regulations that mandate the monetization of environmental externalities. EcoCorp's sustainability team is tasked with selecting the most appropriate valuation approach from those discussed within ISO 14008-2019 to represent the potential damage costs associated with increased particulate matter emissions affecting local air quality and human health. Considering the standard's emphasis on practical application and the nature of the impact, which of the following methodological categories, as broadly defined by ISO 14008-2019, would most directly address the valuation of these health-related damages through observable market signals? Option A. Methods based on revealed preferences, such as the travel cost method or hedonic pricing models. Option B. Methods based on the replacement cost or restoration cost of environmental assets. Option C. Methods based on expert judgment and Delphi techniques for impact assessment. Option D. Methods based on hypothetical market scenarios, such as contingent valuation or choice experiments. The correct answer is A. Methods based on revealed preferences, such as the travel cost method or hedonic pricing models. Explanation: the core of ISO 14008-2019 is to provide a framework for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts. This involves a systematic approach to identifying, quantifying, and valuing these impacts. The standard outlines various methods for valuation, categorizing them based on their underlying principles and applicability. Key to this is the distinction between methods that rely on observed market behavior, like revealed preference methods, and those that infer value from hypothetical situations or stated preferences, like stated preference methods. The standard also emphasizes the importance of context, the purpose of the valuation, and the specific environmental aspects being assessed when selecting an appropriate valuation technique. It guides users through the process of defining the scope, selecting relevant environmental impacts, gathering data, and applying valuation methods to arrive at a monetary figure. The structure of the standard typically moves from general principles to specific guidance on data collection, method selection, and reporting, ensuring a robust and transparent valuation process aligned with established economic and environmental principles. The standard does not prescribe a single valuation method, but rather a process for selecting and applying suitable methods based on the specific context and objectives of the valuation. Question 15. An industrial facility is undertaking an environmental performance evaluation and aims to monetize the impact of a projected increase in particulate matter emissions from a new manufacturing process. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14008-2019, what is the most critical factor to consider when selecting a method for assigning a monetary value to this specific environmental impact? Option A. Ease with which the chosen valuation method can be integrated into existing financial accounting software without regard for methodological rigor. Option B. The historical monetary valuation methods used by competing organizations in the same industry sector for comparative analysis. Option C. The perceived public sensitivity to air pollution, irrespective of quantifiable damage costs, to inform public relations strategies. Option D. The specific objective of the monetary valuation and the availability of robust empirical data to support the chosen valuation technique. The correct answer is D. The specific objective of the monetary valuation and the availability of robust empirical data to support the chosen valuation technique. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14008-2019 is to provide a framework for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts. When evaluating environmental performance, particularly in the context of this standard, the focus is on translating environmental changes into monetary terms. This involves selecting appropriate valuation methods that align with the specific environmental aspect being assessed and the intended use of the valuation. For instance, if an organization is assessing the impact of increased greenhouse gas emissions, a method like the social cost of carbon would be relevant. However, the standard emphasizes that the selection of valuation methods should be driven by the objective of the valuation and the availability of reliable data. It also highlights the importance of considering the scope and boundaries of the valuation, ensuring that all significant environmental impacts within those boundaries are considered. The process involves identifying the environmental aspect, quantifying its physical change, and then applying a monetary valuation technique to assign a financial value. This monetary value can then be used for various purposes, such as internal decision-making, reporting, or comparing the costs and benefits of different environmental improvement initiatives. The standard guides users to consider the purpose of the valuation, the specific environmental impact being measured, and the context in which the valuation will be used to ensure its relevance and credibility. The process is iterative and requires careful consideration of data quality and methodological choices to ensure that the resulting monetary values accurately reflect the environmental significance. Question 16. When undertaking a monetary valuation of the impact of a new industrial wastewater discharge on a river ecosystem, which of the following data collection and analysis considerations would be most aligned with the principles outlined in ISO 14008-2019 for ensuring a credible and defensible environmental valuation? Option A. Prioritizing the use of peer-reviewed ecological studies and government-issued water quality reports that directly assess the impact of similar industrial effluents on aquatic biodiversity and ecosystem services in comparable river systems, supplemented by site-specific sampling where critical data gaps exist. Option B. Utilizing internal company environmental monitoring data exclusively, assuming it accurately reflects all potential impacts, and applying a standard economic damage cost model without validation from external scientific literature. Option C. Relying solely on publicly available, aggregated national environmental data for water pollution, as this provides the broadest statistical basis for estimating damages without the need for site-specific investigations. Option D. Employing a qualitative expert judgment approach based on general knowledge of industrial pollution impacts, without collecting specific quantitative data on the receiving river's ecological condition or the effluent's composition. The correct answer is A. prioritizing the use of peer-reviewed ecological studies and government-issued water quality reports that directly assess the impact of similar industrial effluents on aquatic biodiversity and ecosystem services in comparable river systems, supplemented by site-specific sampling, where critical data gaps exist. Explanation: ISO 14008-2019 emphasizes the importance of robust data collection and analysis for accurate monetary valuation of environmental impacts. When selecting data sources for valuing an impact like biodiversity loss due to agricultural runoff, an organization must consider the specific context and the type of impact being assessed. The standard guides users to prioritize data that is relevant, reliable, and representative of the environmental aspect and its consequences. For biodiversity loss, this often involves ecological surveys, species population data, habitat mapping, and expert assessments of ecosystem services. The choice between primary and secondary data depends on availability, cost, and the required level of detail. However, the core principle is to use the most appropriate data that can credibly link the environmental aspect to a monetary value, reflecting the chosen valuation approach, e.g., damage cost, replacement cost, or benefit transfer. The process involves not just gathering data, but also critically analyzing its quality, completeness, and potential biases to ensure the integrity of the valuation. The goal is to establish a defensible monetary estimate that reflects the environmental significance of the impact, aligning with the principles of environmental accounting and decision-making. Question 17. Consider a hypothetical industrial facility, Etha Dynamics, which experienced a minor containment breach in its waste processing unit. Due to swift implementation of pre-existing emergency protocols, the released effluent was fully contained within the facility's secondary containment system, preventing any release into the adjacent river, a protected aquatic habitat. The costs incurred for immediate containment, activation of emergency response teams, and the subsequent decontamination of the secondary containment area are being evaluated for their contribution to the facility's environmental performance reporting under ISO 14008-2019, which specific monetary valuation term, as defined within the standard for assessing environmental impacts, most accurately describes these incurred costs in the context of preventing a larger environmental damage. Option A, avoided cost. Option B, replacement cost. Option C, opportunity cost. Option D, contingent valuation. The correct answer is A, avoided cost. Explanation: ISO 14008-2019, in its foundational definitions, distinguishes between various methods for assigning monetary values to environmental impacts. The standard emphasizes the importance of clarity regarding the purpose and scope of such valuations. A key distinction is made between approaches that focus on the cost incurred to avoid or mitigate an impact, and those that attempt to quantify the value society places on preventing or restoring environmental damage. The concept of avoided cost specifically refers to the expenditures that would have been necessary to prevent an environmental impact from occurring in the first place, or to remediate it if it had occurred. This contrasts with methods that might seek to capture willingness to pay or willingness to accept compensation, which are different valuation techniques. Therefore, when considering the scenario of a chemical spill that is successfully contained before it reaches a sensitive ecosystem, the cost of containment measures, emergency response, and immediate cleanup efforts directly represent the avoided cost of a much larger environmental catastrophe. This is a direct application of the definition of avoided cost as per the standards framework for monetary valuation. Question 18. When applying the principles outlined in ISO 14008-2019 for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, consider a scenario where a community is deliberating the preservation of a pristine natural habitat for its intrinsic beauty and ecological significance, with a strong emphasis on ensuring its availability for descendants. Which specific type of non-use value, as defined and considered within the standard, best encapsulates the valuation an individual might place on this future availability, irrespective of their own potential future use? Option A, existence value. Option B, bequest value. Option C, vicarious value. Option D, option value. The correct answer is B, bequest value. Explanation: ISO 14008-2019, a standard for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, addresses various valuation approaches. Bequest value, a component of non-use value, refers to the value an individual places on the existence of an environmental good or service for future generations, even if they themselves will never directly experience it. This is distinct from existence value, which is the value derived from knowing something exists, regardless of future use. It is also different from option value, which is the value of keeping an option open for future use. The standard emphasizes that bequest value is a subjective measure and can be estimated using methods such as contingent valuation, which involves surveying individuals about their willingness to pay for environmental preservation. The challenge in quantifying bequest value lies in its inherent intergenerational and altruistic nature, making direct observation of use or market transactions impossible. Therefore, valuation techniques must rely on stated preferences. Question 19. Consider a scenario where an industrial facility's effluent discharge has led to the eutrophication of a local lake, significantly reducing its recreational value due to algal blooms and decreased water clarity. The relevant environmental authority mandates that the impact be valued using the replacement cost method as per ISO 14008 guidelines. The facility is exploring options to mitigate this impact. Which of the following approaches most accurately reflects the application of the replacement cost method in this context? Option A. Calculating the cost of constructing a new, advanced water treatment plant to process the lake's water to a standard suitable for recreation, including capital expenditure, operational costs, and maintenance over the expected lifespan of the plant. Option B. Determining the market price of similar lakefront properties before and after the eutrophication event to assess the change in property values. Option C. Quantifying the cost of implementing a public awareness campaign to educate the community about the causes and effects of eutrophication and promote responsible water usage. Option D. Estimating the loss in revenue for local businesses that rely on the lake's recreational activities, such as boat rentals and lakeside cafes, due to the reduced water quality. The correct answer is A. Calculating the cost of constructing a new, advanced water treatment plant to process the lake's water to a standard suitable for recreation, including capital expenditure, operational costs, and maintenance over the expected lifespan of the plant. Explanation. The replacement cost method, RCM, is a technique used in ISO 14008 to estimate the monetary value of an environmental impact by determining the cost of replacing the damaged or degraded environmental service with an equivalent one. This method is particularly relevant when the environmental damage affects a quantifiable service that can be restored or substituted. For instance, if a river's water quality is degraded, impacting its suitability for irrigation, the RCM would assess the cost of providing an alternative source of water for irrigation, such as constructing a new pipeline from a cleaner water body or investing in advanced water treatment technologies for the affected river. The core principle is to identify the least costly method of achieving the same level of environmental service. This involves considering the capital costs, operational and maintenance costs, and any associated discount rates to bring the environmental service back to a comparable state or to substitute it. The method requires a clear definition of the environmental service being valued and a thorough analysis of available replacement options and their associated expenditures. It is important to note that the RCM focuses on the cost of achieving a functional equivalent, not necessarily restoring the original environmental condition if a substitute service can fulfill the same purpose. The calculation itself involves summing up all expenditures associated with the chosen replacement or restoration option, adjusted for time value of money if necessary, to arrive at a present value. For example, if a wetland is damaged, reducing its capacity to filter pollutants, the RCM might calculate the cost of constructing an artificial wetland or installing advanced filtration systems to achieve the same pollutant removal rate. This would involve estimating construction costs, ongoing maintenance, energy consumption, and any necessary monitoring, then discounting these future costs to their present value. The outcome represents the monetary value of the environmental service lost, expressed as the cost to replace it. Question 20. Consider an organization implementing both ISO 14001 and ISO 14008. If the organization identifies a significant environmental aspect related to water consumption and wishes to monetize its impact to inform a new environmental objective within its EMS. Which of the following best describes the relationship and application of ISO 14008 within the ISO 14001 framework? Option A. ISO 14008 provides a structured approach to assigning monetary values to the environmental impacts associated with water consumption, which can then be used to quantitatively assess the financial implications of different water reduction strategies, thereby supporting the establishment and monitoring of water-related environmental objectives under ISO 14001. Option B. ISO 14008 dictates specific water usage reduction targets that must be integrated into an ISO 14001 environmental management system, overriding any existing organizational policies. Option C. ISO 14001 requires the use of a specific monetary valuation technique detailed in ISO 14008 for all environmental aspects, regardless of their materiality or relevance to the organization's environmental policy. Option D. ISO 14008 is solely for external reporting of environmental liabilities and has no direct application in setting internal environmental objectives within an ISO 14001 system. The correct answer is A. ISO 14008 provides a structured approach to assigning monetary values to the environmental impacts associated with water consumption, which can then be used to quantitatively assess the financial implications of different water reduction strategies, thereby supporting the establishment and monitoring of water-related environmental objectives under ISO 14001. Explanation: ISO 14008-2019 establishes principles and requirements for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts. While it does not mandate a specific valuation method, it emphasizes the importance of transparency, consistency, and the use of appropriate methods for the context. When integrating monetary valuation with environmental management systems like ISO 14001, the key is to ensure that the valuation process supports the objectives and targets set within the environmental management system. ISO 14001 focuses on establishing, implementing, maintaining, and improving an environmental management system, EMS, to manage environmental aspects, fulfill compliance obligations, and achieve environmental objectives. Monetary valuation, as per ISO 14008, can provide a crucial financial dimension to these environmental aspects and objectives. For instance, the cost of an environmental impact, e.g., pollution damage, can be quantified monetarily, which can then inform decisions related to environmental performance improvement, investment in cleaner technologies, or the setting of more realistic environmental targets within the ISO 14001 framework. The standard suggests that the results of monetary valuation can be used for various purposes, including internal decision-making, reporting, and communication. Therefore, a robust linkage involves using the outputs of ISO 14008 to inform the planning, operational control, and performance evaluation stages of an ISO 14001 EMS. This ensures that environmental decisions are not only technically sound, but also economically considered, fostering a more holistic approach to environmental management. The integration allows for a more comprehensive understanding of the financial implications of environmental performance, thereby enhancing the effectiveness of the EMS in achieving sustainable outcomes. Question 21. An environmental consulting firm is tasked with assessing the monetary value of preserving a pristine rainforest ecosystem in a developing nation, considering its significance for indigenous communities, potential for future bioprospecting, and intrinsic ecological importance. According to ISO 14008-2019, which combination of value types would be most comprehensively addressed by various valuation methodologies when evaluating such a scenario? Option A. Existence value, indirect use value, and bequest value. Option B. Direct use value, indirect use value, and bequest value. Option C. Indirect use value, bequest value, and option use value. Option D. Direct use value, option use value, and existence value. The correct answer is D. Direct use value, option use value, and existence value. Explanation: ISO 14008-2019, the standard for monetary valuation of environmental impacts, categorizes value into different forms to facilitate a comprehensive understanding of environmental externalities. These forms are crucial for applying appropriate valuation techniques. The standard distinguishes between use value and non-use value. Use value encompasses direct use, indirect use, and option use. Direct use value relates to consumption or enjoyment of an environmental resource or service. Indirect use value refers to benefits derived from ecological functions that support human activities, such as pollination supporting agriculture. Option use value represents the value placed on maintaining the possibility of future use of an environmental resource, even if it is not currently used. Non-use value includes existence value, which is the value people place on knowing that an environmental resource exists, and bequest value, the value of preserving resources for future generations. Understanding these distinctions is fundamental to selecting and applying valuation methods, such as contingent valuation, choice experiments, or travel cost methods, in alignment with the standard's principles. The standard emphasizes that the selection of a valuation method should be guided by the specific environmental impact being assessed and the type of value that is most relevant to that impact. For instance, a change in biodiversity might involve both direct use values, e.g., ecotourism, and non-use values, e.g., existence value of a rare species. Question 22. When applying the principles of ISO 14008, 2019 for the monetary valuation of an endangered species habitat, which approach most effectively addresses the valuation of the habitat's worth that is independent of its direct utility to human populations, aligning with the standard's consideration of non-use values. Option A. Calculating the cost of ecosystem services provided by the habitat, such as water purification and carbon sequestration, which directly benefit downstream communities. Option B. Utilizing market price analysis for timber and non-timber forest products extracted from the habitat to determine its economic contribution. Option C. Estimating the recreational value of the habitat through travel cost methods, considering visitor expenditures for activities like bird watching and hiking. Option D. Employing stated preference techniques like contingent valuation to elicit public willingness to pay for the species' continued existence, even if the public never directly interacts with the habitat. The correct answer is D. Employing stated preference techniques like contingent valuation to elicit public willingness to pay for the species' continued existence, even if the public never directly interacts with the habitat. Explanation. ISO 14008-2019 distinguishes between intrinsic and extrinsic values in the context of environmental impact valuation. Intrinsic value refers to the inherent worth of an environmental entity or system, independent of its usefulness to humans. This concept acknowledges that ecosystems, species, or natural landscapes possess value simply by existing, irrespective of any direct or indirect benefits they provide to people. Extrinsic value, conversely, relates to the utility or benefit an environmental aspect provides to humans, encompassing both direct use values, e.g., timber, water, and indirect use values, e.g., pollination, climate regulation. When applying ISO 14008-2019, particularly in methods like contingent valuation or choice modeling, the challenge lies in capturing or acknowledging intrinsic values. While market-based approaches or revealed preference methods are more adept at quantifying extrinsic use values, stated preference methods can, in principle, attempt to elicit willingness to pay for preserving environmental assets for their own sake, thereby approximating intrinsic value. However, the standard emphasizes that the monetary valuation process should clearly articulate the valuation approach and the underlying assumptions regarding the type of value being quantified. The primary difficulty in monetizing intrinsic value is its non-anthropocentric nature, making direct translation into monetary terms problematic and often reliant on proxies or ethical considerations rather than direct economic utility. The standard acknowledges that not all environmental values are easily or appropriately monetized, and the decision to monetize should be guided by the purpose of the valuation and the context of the decision being supported. Question 23. A manufacturing facility in the European Union has upgraded its air pollution control technology, leading to a substantial reduction in particulate matter emissions. This upgrade effectively prevents the need for additional, more expensive abatement measures that would have been required to meet stricter upcoming emission standards under the Industrial Emissions Directive, WIDE, according to the principles of ISO 14008 for monetary valuation of environmental impacts. What specific category of costs would be most directly represented by the financial savings realized from not needing to implement these more costly, future abatement measures? Option A. Avoided costs associated with preventing additional pollution control expenditures. Option B. Opportunity costs of foregoing alternative pollution reduction strategies. Option C. Replacement costs for damaged environmental assets. Option D. Contingent valuation costs reflecting potential future damages. Correct answer is A. Avoided costs associated with preventing additional pollution control expenditures. Explanation. The avoided cost method, as applied within the framework of ISO 14008, quantifies the monetary value of an environmental impact by assessing the costs that would have been incurred if the impact had not been prevented or reduced. This method focuses on the expenses that an organization or society would have borne to mitigate or remediate the environmental damage. For instance, if a company implements a new process that significantly reduces its wastewater discharge, the avoided cost would be the sum of expenses that would have been necessary for treating that additional wastewater under the old process. These could include costs for advanced filtration systems, increased chemical usage for treatment, higher energy consumption for pumping and aeration, and potential fines or penalties for exceeding discharge limits as stipulated by environmental regulations like the EU's Water Framework Directive or national equivalents. The core principle is to determine what expenditures were bypassed due to the environmental improvement. This contrasts with methods that focus on the market price of a good or service, or the cost of replacing a damaged asset. The avoided cost method is particularly relevant for impacts that have a direct, quantifiable link to operational expenses or regulatory compliance costs. Question 24. Consider a scenario where industrial emissions in a region lead to significant acid deposition, causing measurable damage to local forest ecosystems. This damage manifests as reduced tree growth rates, increased susceptibility to pest infestations, and a decline in the biodiversity of understory plant species. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14008-2019 for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, which of the following approaches would be most appropriate for quantifying the economic consequences of this specific type of ecosystem damage? Option A. Calculating the cost of purchasing carbon credits to offset the increased CO2 absorption capacity of the damaged forest. Option B. Estimating the monetary value of the lost timber yield and the cost of mitigating pest infestations in affected forest areas. Option C. Quantifying the cost of replacing the damaged forest with an artificial, engineered ecosystem designed to provide similar ecological functions. Option D. Determining the aesthetic value of the forest through surveys of local residents and tourists who visit the area. The correct answer is B. Estimating the monetary value of the lost timber yield and the cost of mitigating pest infestations in affected forest areas. Explanation. The core of ISO 14008-2019 is the monetary valuation of environmental impacts. When considering damage to ecosystems from air pollution, specifically acid deposition, the standard outlines a framework for quantifying these impacts. This involves identifying the environmental aspect, air pollution leading to acid deposition, the environmental impact, damage to forest ecosystems, acidification of lakes and soils, and impact on biodiversity, and then assigning a monetary value. The standard emphasizes that the valuation should reflect the loss of ecosystem services. For acid deposition's impact on forest ecosystems, this loss can manifest as reduced timber yield, increased susceptibility to disease, and altered species composition. When valuing these impacts, a key consideration is the choice of valuation method. Methods like the travel cost method or hedonic pricing might be used for recreational or aesthetic impacts, but for direct ecosystem service loss like reduced timber productivity due to acidification, methods focusing on market prices or replacement costs are often more appropriate. For instance, if acid deposition reduces the growth rate of a commercially valuable tree species by 10%, the monetary valuation would be based on the lost market value of that timber. Similarly, if acidification leads to the loss of a fish species in a lake, the valuation might consider the loss of recreational fishing value or the cost of restocking. The standard guides practitioners to select methods that are appropriate for the specific ecosystem service and the context of the impact. Therefore, the most direct and relevant approach for quantifying the economic loss of forest productivity due to acid deposition, as per ISO 14008, would be to estimate the value of the lost timber yield, which directly represents a diminished ecosystem service. Question 25. When applying ISO 14008, 2019 to monetize the degradation of a crucial regulating service like flood control provided by a wetland ecosystem, which of the following valuation approaches most directly aligns with the standard's principles for quantifying the loss of such a functional benefit? Option A. Estimating the market price of land adjacent to the wetland that is less prone to flooding. Option B. Assessing the public perception of flood risk reduction through surveys and assigning a monetary value based on willingness to pay. Option C. Quantifying the cost of reforestation in a nearby area to compensate for the loss of flood control. Option D. Calculating the avoided cost of flood damage that would have occurred without the wetland's natural flood mitigation capacity. Correct answer is D. Calculating the avoided cost of flood damage that would have occurred without the wetland's natural flood mitigation capacity. Explanation. The question probes the application of ISO 14008-2019 concerning the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, specifically focusing on regulating services and their integration into valuation frameworks. Regulating services, such as climate regulation, water purification, and pollination, are ecosystem services that control natural processes. ISO 14008 provides guidance on how to assign monetary values to environmental impacts, which can include the degradation or enhancement of these regulating services. When considering the valuation of regulating services, a key challenge is to accurately capture their functional contribution and the benefits they provide to society. The standard emphasizes that the choice of valuation method should be appropriate to the specific environmental impact and the context of its assessment. For regulating services, methods that focus on the costs of replacing the service or the benefits derived from its continued provision are often employed. For instance, valuing climate regulation might involve estimating the social cost of carbon or the cost of artificial carbon sequestration. Valuing water purification might involve comparing the cost of natural filtration to the cost of engineered water treatment. The crucial aspect for advanced students to grasp is how these ecosystem functions translate into quantifiable economic values that can inform decision-making, policy development, and environmental management, aligning with the principles of ISO 14008. The standard advocates for transparency and justification of the chosen methods and data. The correct approach involves identifying the specific regulating service, understanding its contribution to human well-being or economic activity, and selecting a valuation technique that reflects this contribution, such as benefit transfer, replacement cost, or avoided cost methods, while acknowledging the inherent uncertainties. Question 26. A multinational corporation is assessing the environmental impacts of its new manufacturing facility, which is located adjacent to a large, publicly accessible estuary. The estuary supports diverse marine life, serves as a recreational fishing ground for local communities, and contributes to coastal buffering. The company's operations are projected to increase sediment runoff and nutrient discharge into the estuary. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14008-2019, for valuing impacts on public goods and common resources, which of the following valuation approaches would most appropriately capture the multifaceted economic consequences of these discharges on the estuary's functions and community benefits? Option A. A replacement cost method estimating the expense of artificial reef construction to mimic the estuary's buffering capacity, ignoring ecological services and recreational use. Option B. An input-output analysis focusing solely on the direct economic output of the fishing industry without considering broader ecosystem services or recreational benefits. Option C. A simple market price assessment based on the cost of treating similar pollutants in industrial wastewater, assuming this reflects the estuary's value. Option D. A combined approach utilizing travel cost method for recreational fishing and contingent valuation for non-use values associated with biodiversity and coastal protection. The correct answer is D. A combined approach utilizing travel cost method for recreational fishing and contingent valuation for non-use values associated with biodiversity and coastal protection. Explanation. ISO 14008-2019 addresses the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, including those affecting public goods and common resources. Public goods are characterized by non-rivalry. One person's consumption does not diminish another's, and non-excludability. It is difficult or impossible to prevent individuals from using them. Common resources, while non-excludable, are rivalrous. The valuation of impacts on these resources is complex because their use and degradation often do not have clear market prices. Methods such as contingent valuation, choice modeling, and benefit transfer are employed to estimate the economic value of preserving or degrading these resources. For instance, valuing the impact of increased atmospheric CO2 on the global climate, a public good, requires assessing changes in agricultural productivity, health impacts, and coastal protection, all of which are difficult to quantify through direct market transactions. The standard emphasizes the importance of transparency, documentation, and the appropriate selection of valuation methods based on the specific environmental impact and the context of its assessment. The challenge lies in capturing the full range of values, including use values, non-use values, existence, bequest, and option values, and the potential for intergenerational equity considerations. Question 27. In the context of applying the total economic value (TEV) framework for monetary valuation of environmental impacts as guided by ISO 14008, which specific component of TEV most directly captures the value associated with maintaining the possibility of future, yet currently unexercised, utilization of a natural resource or ecosystem service, such as preserving a pristine forest for potential future ecotourism or scientific research, even if there is no immediate plan for such activities? Option A, option value. Option B, bequest value. Option C, indirect use value. Option D, existence value. The correct answer is A, option value. Explanation. The total economic value (TEV) framework for environmental valuation, as considered within ISO 14008, encompasses both direct and indirect use values, as well as non-use values. Direct use values are derived from the consumption or utilization of environmental resources, such as timber harvesting or recreational fishing. Indirect use values relate to the functional benefits provided by ecosystems, like water purification by wetlands or pollination services by insects. Non-use values, often the most challenging to quantify, represent the value people place on an environmental asset even if they never directly use it. These include existence value, valuing the mere existence of a species or ecosystem; bequest value, valuing the option to pass on resources to future generations; and option value, valuing the possibility of future use. Within the TEV, the option value is specifically concerned with the value of maintaining the possibility of future use of an environmental resource, even if current use is nil or uncertain. This is distinct from bequest value, which focuses on intergenerational equity and legacy, and existence value, which is about the intrinsic worth of an entity. Therefore, when considering the components of TEV, the value attributed to preserving the potential for future, currently unexercised, use of an ecosystem service falls under the category of option value. Question 28. Consider a remote, undeveloped island nation where a valuable, non-renewable mineral deposit has been discovered. The nation's legal framework has not yet established clear ownership or extraction rights for natural resources. According to the principles underpinning ISO 14008-2019, for the monetary valuation of environmental impacts, what is the most significant prerequisite for effectively valuing the environmental consequences of mineral extraction on this island? Option A, the implementation of a robust system for monitoring and reporting greenhouse gas emissions from extraction activities. Option B, the establishment of clearly defined and enforceable property rights for the mineral deposit and associated land. Option C, the development of a comprehensive environmental impact assessment methodology specific to the island's unique ecosystem. Option D, the creation of a public registry detailing all known biodiversity species present on the island. Correct answer is B, the establishment of clearly defined and enforceable property rights for the mineral deposit and associated land. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14008-2019 concerning property rights and environmental management is that clearly defined and enforceable property rights are a crucial prerequisite for effective environmental management and the successful application of monetary valuation methods. When property rights are ambiguous or non-existent, it creates a situation of open access or common pool resources, often leading to the tragedy of the commons. In such scenarios, individual actors have little incentive to conserve the resource or bear the costs of environmental protection, as the benefits of their actions are diffused among all users, while the costs are borne solely by them. This lack of clear ownership or stewardship hinders the internalization of environmental externalities, making it difficult to assign responsibility for environmental damage or to implement market-based mechanisms for environmental valuation and management. For instance, without clear rights to a fishery, no single entity has a strong incentive to limit catch sizes, leading to overfishing and depletion of the resource, which is difficult to value accurately or manage effectively under a framework like ISO 14008, without addressing the underlying property rights structure. Therefore, establishing and enforcing property rights, whether private, communal, or state-managed with clear user rights, is foundational for the practical application of monetary valuation of environmental impacts. Question 29. When applying cost-based valuation methods under ISO 14008-2019 to quantify the monetary value of an industrial facility's accidental release of a specific heavy metal into a local water body, which of the following best represents the core principle for determining the valuation? Option A. The projected cost of implementing a new, state-of-the-art filtration system for the entire municipality's water supply as a precautionary measure against any future contamination. Option B. The estimated cost of purchasing and implementing a specific, proven, and economically viable technology to neutralize the released heavy metal in the affected water body and restore it to a predefined acceptable quality standard. Option C. The market price of the heavy metal at the time of the release, assuming it could be economically recovered and sold. Option D. The aggregate cost of all available remediation technologies that could potentially restore the water body to its pre-incident condition, irrespective of their practical feasibility or economic efficiency. Correct answer is D. The aggregate cost of all available remediation technologies that could potentially restore the water body to its pre-incident condition, irrespective of their practical feasibility or economic efficiency. Explanation: the fundamental principle behind cost-based valuation methods, particularly in the context of ISO 14008, is to estimate the monetary value of an environmental impact by considering the costs incurred to avoid, reduce, or remediate that impact. This approach often aligns with the concept of avoided cost or replacement cost. For instance, if an industrial facility's effluent discharge causes a specific pollutant to enter a river, the cost-based valuation would focus on what it would cost to either prevent that discharge, e.g., installing advanced wastewater treatment, or to clean up the river to a comparable state if the discharge were to occur. The standard emphasizes that these costs should reflect actual expenditures or well-justified estimates of expenditures. It is crucial to consider the full life cycle of the mitigation or avoidance measure. For example, if a company invests in energy-efficient machinery to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the valuation would not just be the purchase price of the machinery, but would also include installation, maintenance, and operational costs over its lifespan, as these all contribute to the total cost of achieving the environmental benefit. Similarly, if a regulatory body imposes a fine for exceeding emission limits, that fine can be considered a form of cost associated with the environmental impact, reflecting the societal cost of noncompliance. The valuation should be specific to the impact and the context, ensuring that the costs are directly attributable to the environmental change being assessed. This method is often used when direct market prices for the environmental damage are unavailable or unreliable. Question 30. Consider a developing nation that has ratified the Paris Agreement and is seeking to incorporate environmental costs into its national infrastructure planning, specifically for a large-scale hydroelectric dam project. The nation has limited experience with sophisticated environmental valuation techniques and faces constraints in collecting primary data. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14008-2019, which approach to monetary valuation would be most appropriate and defensible for assessing the potential impacts of this dam, considering the need for practical implementation and contextual relevance. Option A. Employing established valuation techniques from high-income countries without any adaptation or validation for the local context, assuming universal applicability of economic valuation principles. Option B, implementing complex, primary data-driven contingent valuation studies for all identified environmental impacts, despite the significant resource requirements and potential for high uncertainty due to limited local expertise. Option C, prioritizing benefit transfer methods, adapting existing valuation studies from similar dam projects in countries with comparable socio-economic indicators, while also conducting limited, targeted primary surveys to validate key assumptions and local preferences. Option D, relying solely on qualitative assessments of environmental impacts without attempting any monetary valuation, to avoid the complexities and potential inaccuracies of quantitative methods in a data-scarce environment. The correct answer is C, prioritizing benefit transfer methods, adapting existing valuation studies from similar dam projects in countries with comparable socio-economic indicators, while also conducting limited, targeted primary surveys to validate key assumptions and local preferences. Explanation: the application of ISO 14008 in different contexts requires careful consideration of the specific environmental impacts and the relevant valuation methods. For a developing nation aiming to integrate environmental costs into infrastructure project assessments, the standard emphasizes the importance of using valuation techniques that are feasible and appropriate given local data availability and institutional capacity. Methods like benefit transfer, which adapts existing valuation estimates from similar contexts, are often more practical than primary data collection for contingent valuation or choice experiments, especially when resources are limited. Furthermore, the standard guides the selection of methods that reflect the cultural and socio-economic context of the valuation, ensuring that the monetary values assigned to environmental impacts are meaningful and defensible within that specific setting. This involves understanding the specific legal and regulatory frameworks governing environmental protection and economic development within the nation, as these can influence the perception and valuation of environmental services and damages. The selection of appropriate discount rates, reflecting the nation's economic realities and intergenerational equity considerations, is also a critical aspect of applying the standard effectively in such a context. The goal is to achieve a robust and contextually relevant monetary valuation that supports informed decision-making for sustainable development.